Welcome to episode 286 of Real Health Radio. You can find the show notes and the links talked about as part of this episode at 7, so the word all spelled out, SEVEN health.com/286. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Real Health Radio. I'm your host, Chris Sandel. I'm a nutritionist and a coach, and I help clients to fully recover. So happy New Year. I'm actually recording this in December, so it hasn't happened yet, but this will be the first podcast released in 2024. And I'm aware that there is a lot of nonsense that comes out at this time of year about dieting, about New Year, New You, and all of these pressures that come up. And I know for people who are dealing with disordered eating or an eating disorder, this can be a particularly tricky time because there's so much stuff that comes up about going on this diet or that diet or making these changes. And I'm not against reflecting and using the start of the year as a place to decide on some new path and deciding on making 2024 about your recovery. It's just, I want people to be focusing on goals and things that are really going to add to the quality of their life. And that's what I want to really talk about as part of this episode. And this episode is going to be about goal setting in recovery. And there are different ways of doing goal setting and different types of goals. And so I want to talk about that as part of this episode. So I'm going to go through a number of different ways that you can do this. And look, like so many things in recovery, there is no one perfect way that you have to do it. It is different for different people. And so I'm going to offer some different ideas here, and then you can have a think about it for yourself, and then you can experiment and play around with this. I'm always encouraging clients to experiment. I think this takes a lot of the pressure off in terms of getting things right. It's more, let's run the experiment and let's see what happens, and then use the experience to reflect and then decide, okay, what do we want to do next? And so that is what I want to suggest as part of this is take all of these ideas and see how they fit for you and then run the experiment. So the first type of goal setting I want to mention is what I call creating your vision. And this is really where you're taking a big picture, long-term view of really where you want to get to. And I think that this is very important as part of recovery because it can be very easy to get bogged down in the day-to-day. It can get easy to be stuck in everything feeling so hard, or there's all of this fear, and really losing sight of where do I want to get to? What would I like my life to look like? And this is also a problem because of the eating disorder. It really shrinks what you think is possible. It changes your perspective and your perception. And so I think doing an exercise like this in terms of creating a vision can help to pull you out of that place and give you something tangible that you can continue to come back to. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to read out the instructions as part of doing this exercise. And so if you're listening to this and you're wanting to do it as an activity, you can just sort of write this down or pay attention to the different prompts as part of this. But as part of this exercise, I want you to imagine yourself a year from now. And it could be 2 years, or it could be 3 years. The amount of time doesn't really matter. But there is this point in the future that you are imagining. And at this point in the future, things have improved in your life. You're showing up as your authentic self. You've built better relationships. You're living in alignment with your values, and you've created a rich and full and meaningful life. And to reach this place, you set many goals and you've achieved them. And I want you to imagine you are this future self. So it's a year or 2 or 3 years from now. And you're really basking in the glory of this new life and reflecting on the journey it's taken for you to get here. And so there are now a number of questions that I suggest as journaling prompts as part of this to really start to think about what has changed over this time. So question number 1 is, describe what your life looks like at this future place and what were the goals that you set to get there. And when doing this, I want you to write in that future tense. So write as if I am, not in the future I will. So write as if you are in that place in the future and you are reflecting on this. And so question 2 is describe what you did to achieve these goals and be as specific as possible. Question 3, what did you give up? What did you let go of so that you could create these results? Question 4, what qualities or strengths did you live by or act upon in the face of this? Question 5, how did you treat yourself as you went through this journey? Question 6, who were you being that created these results? Question 7, what are you most grateful for having accomplished and why? And question 8, are there any other words or phrases or events or life experiences that come to mind when you think of what you've achieved? And what I recommend doing as part of this exercise, so 1 is spend time doing it. Give yourself the time to really think about these and to really think about the future that you would like to have and put yourself in that future places as you write those responses. And number 2 is this then becomes a document that you come back to again and again. And so it's something that you read on a daily basis. It's something that during the day you're repeating these kind of things to yourself. You're creating this reality because our beliefs really are just what we've repeated to ourselves over and over again. And what this is doing is starting to create a new reality by you repeating this to yourself regularly. And it's also allowing you to be in contact with this vision. Because I think what can happen, and we'll get onto this when we talk about the smaller goals that you focus on, a lot of that can feel like, well, what's the point? Does it really matter if I have this snack, or does it really matter if I take this time off exercise today? And it can feel very inconsequential. Whereas if there is this vision and this thing that you are wanting to get to, those things then become a lot more important. It's not inconsequential. It's actually, I want to get to this place, and it's really important that I do these things to help create changes to make it there. One of the things I would say with this exercise, and I already sort of mentioned it, is because of the eating disorder, it can really constrain what you think is possible. And so what I would suggest when doing this is really suspend your belief. Like just put all of the, well, I can't do that, or that's too much, or whatever it is, like put all of that stuff to the side and come up with your responses connected to this. And for some people, when they think about it for themselves, there is more of a difficulty. And so maybe it is easier to think about this for someone else. So if I was going to answer these questions for someone else and where I would like them to get to in their recovery, what would be the kinds of things that I would say? Or if this was my son or daughter or niece or nephew, what would I like for them to be achieving when they're older? And if they were in recovery, where would I like them to get to? Or you can imagine that you're creating a character in a film or a character in a novel. And if I was thinking about that character and where I would want them to get to, what would I like to have happen, or what would I like that to look like? And look, if you can do it for yourself and using yourself as the driver for this, like all the better, but I don't want that to be the thing that then gets in the way and doesn't allow this to happen. So using different ways of being able to get past the filter of like, I can't do that, or that's not possible for me. So focusing on other people so that you can create this document that I think is very important. And when working with clients, we are regularly coming back to the vision, and it's something that happens again and again. So then we're going to be looking at shorter term goals. And these can be daily goals, it could be weekly goals, it could be monthly goals. And really with this, you're wanting to look at what are the practical steps to take towards your vision. So what are the things that you can be changing that when you add up all of these changes that are going to occur in some amount of time, you're going to reach that vision? And there's a number of different ways that we can do this. And I'm going to go through 3 different options in terms of setting goals and where I think certain things are applicable or not applicable. But the one thing I would say is true for all of these is when setting your goals, write them out. And I recommend doing this when I'm working with clients. We're doing this every week or every 2 weeks, depending on how long we're setting the goals for, but writing them out so that you have them in black and white. So it's not sort of, oh, I thought about this thing and then I can't really remember what did I think about. It's I've written this out and I'm very explicit about what this goal is. You want to then put them somewhere where it is visible. You want to share it with a partner or a friend or a family member if you can, so that there is this accountability. You are speaking to, this is what I'm going to do. But I don't want this to be something that's a little bit fuzzy. You really want to be very specific about what is my goal and what am I setting as part of this. And you can go through even the SMART goal process. So SMART is an acronym. And so the S stands for specific. So be clear and specific so you know exactly what you're aiming for. M is for measurable, and it means make the goal something that you can track. So you can track and so that you know that you've actually achieved it. It's not fuzzy. It's like, I know that I've done this. It's in a sense, it's binary. Did I do it or did I not do it? A is achievable. So it should be something that stretches your abilities, but is still possible for you to do. R is then relevant. So it's in alignment with your values and your long-term goal objectives, as well as being the thing that is important for you to be focusing on right now. Because with lots of goals, there can be many different things that you can do, but there are things that are going to be more important for you to be focusing on in this moment. And the final one is T, which is time-bound. So set a realistic deadline for you to be able to do this. So if you're focusing on this is the goal for the week, okay, that's what you're focusing on this week, or this is the goal for the next 2 weeks. And so this is what we're focusing on for these 2 weeks. And the reason why I say writing this down is you want to keep the goal the goal. So with recovery, there is going to be lots of different things that you could be focusing on. And what can often happen is I set this goal and then I started focusing on it, but then I started thinking about this other thing and then this other thing, and then I didn't really do very much of anything. And so really saying, okay, this is the goal. This is where I'm putting my focus for this week or this 2 weeks. And if my way of determining was I successful is, did I do the goal? Yes, I did the goal. Great. I was successful. And so I really think it's important to keep the goal and make that the focus rather than getting lost in all of the other possibilities of things that you could do. Okay. So I want to go through then the 3 options in terms of setting goals, and different people speak about different ways of doing this. And so one of them is, and the first one I'm going to talk about is setting a really low bar goal. So a goal that is so easy and feels so easy. And part of the reason for doing this can be so that you start to get momentum because you feel like you're able to do something and it feels like I'm being successful rather than setting a goal and failing and feeling unsuccessful. And what I would say with this one is the purpose is really to get you moving or to get you doing and taking an action. And you set it small with the intention that, okay, maybe I just do what I set, or actually I said I was going to do this, but then once I got started, I did more. So for example, it could be, I'm going to do some stretching for 5 minutes in the morning. And I'm going to do that just to get back into my body. And I'm only doing it for 5 minutes. That's all I've got to do is just stretching for 5 minutes. Or it could be, I'm going to write down one thing that I'm grateful for each day. And I'm going to do that at nighttime. It's going to take me 20 seconds or a minute to do it, but I'm going to do it. Or it could be, I'm going to do a 2-minute breath exercise every day. That's all I need to do. That's my goal. It's just 2 minutes. And with each of these, as I said, this could be, they then start to create you doing momentum. So actually, I ended up doing some stretching for 10 minutes, or I started doing the 2-minute breath exercise and then I did it for 5 minutes, or I did it for 10 minutes, or I put on a meditation as well, or I've now started writing down 3 things that I'm grateful for, or I've started doing more journaling. And so the point of setting these kind of low bar goals is that it then starts you doing some task, and then you may start doing it for longer than the original goal. And it's not that that has to happen to start with, but it's just getting you into the habit and getting you used to setting some time aside to start to do some specific habit. And the thing I would say with these low bar goals is that I would only reserve these for things that are not related to food and movement changes in terms of recovery. So the way I think about this is, if you're trying to make a change to your energy related aspects of recovery, these are not the kind of goals to set. So from my perspective, what drives eating disorders is being in a low energy state. And this can be across the board. It's not just that this is what happens for anorexia. This is true for all eating disorders. And again, this isn't just true for people who are visibly malnourished and we think about as being emaciated. This is true for people in all body sizes. You can be in a low energy state, and that can be then the thing that is driving the eating disorder. And so that is a lot of the focus when I'm working with clients, is how do we start to reverse that? And what are the things that need to happen as part of that? And typically it's looking at the exercise or movement that someone's doing, and also the eating that someone is doing and the amount of calories or energy that they are bringing in. And when looking at this area, I would not be setting one of those low bar goals. And the reason for this is that when making changes to food or to movement, in comparison to some of the other goals I've just talked about in terms of writing down something you're grateful for or doing a 2-minute breath exercise, to make a change to your food or movement, this creates a lot of anxiety. And there's going to be a lot of anxiety that start to rise up as part of this change. And this is true whether you're changing something small or whether you're changing something big. And so, for example, making some change of, I'm going to add in an apple, for example, that could still create an anxiety of like 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, or like a high anxiety response. But even if someone's able to do that, the actual extra energy from that is pretty insignificant in comparison to what is needed as part of the body healing from that eating disorder. And so you have this high amount of anxiety. It feels really challenging to do this. And even when it's done, it doesn't really make very much of a difference. And this is the same with making changes to movement. It's really hard to make a change, even if it's like, oh, let's reduce this by 10 minutes. And then if you're reducing it by a lot more, the anxiety is only a little bit more. And so when I'm thinking about changes to energy and energy balance, I'm much more looking at making more significant changes, what I will refer to in a moment as a medium goal. So when setting these low bar goals, have it be about different things that are not connected to food and exercise. And I would say that if you're in the early stages of recovery, you're really wanting to focus on food and exercise more, because those are the things that are going to make the biggest impact in terms of changing your physical state, which has a knock-on in terms of your psychology, your emotional state, your capacity to deal with challenges. It helps in terms of your resilience. Like it's so important. And so, yeah, I would not be setting any low bar goals connected to that stuff. I would be reserving it for other things like what I just went through. And so, I mean, it could be doing some coloring. It could be doing a jigsaw puzzle. It could be doing all of these other things that might be thought about as sort of low grade self-care. Those are the kinds of things where I would be in favor of setting one of these low bar goals. And this isn't necessarily for everyone. I think this is more helpful when someone has trouble just getting started with anything. And so just setting it something small to get that momentum, I think then is really helpful. But if you're in a place where actually we can set a much more significant goal connected to these other things, I would start there. I don't think you need to start with one of these low bar goals. It's only if actually I really need to start from that place. So the second one, or the second type of goal, I'm going to refer to as a medium goal. And this is something that pushes you out of your comfort zone and will make a difference to your recovery. And this is often where I will work on things with clients. And so let me give a couple of examples here. And this would be where I'm very much looking at things like food and movement. So it could be adding in 500 calories to your eating each day as a goal. And we could then have a discussion about how that would look like. Is it all at one meal? Is it changing to snacks? Like, what is the easiest way for that to happen? But having that kind of more significant change come in. It could be stopping all exercise for an allotted amount of time as a medium goal. It could be eating the same fear food. So, for example, eating pizza each day for a week. And so these are more significant goals. And why I'm calling them more significant is because they're going to make a change to your energy debt. So it's going to start to make inroads into the low energy state that you're in. With these kind of goals, what invariably happens, and I've been doing this a long time, so I know that there is this pattern connected to it, is when setting these kind of goals, there is a lot of fear and anxiety that comes up. And it can be hard even just to set this kind of a goal and to say, okay, I'm going to do this and I hold myself accountable to doing it. When it is then set, in the lead up to actually doing the thing that you said you were going to do, there is lots of anticipation anxiety. And there can be lots of worry and fear and uncomfortableness and uncomfortable thoughts and sensations. And then when you actually do the thing, typically it is better than expected. So it was easier than I thought it was going to be. It doesn't mean it was easy, but it was easier. It wasn't as bad as the anticipation anxiety made out. And as part of this, there can be some lingering that happens after. So let me use the pizza example. So there's anticipation anxiety before having the pizza. There is then the experience of having the pizza, which wasn't quite as bad as you thought it was going to be. And then after the event of eating the pizza, there is some difficulty as part of that. So there can be feelings of shame or feelings of regret or physical sensations in the body that are uncomfortable. And what I suggest that clients do with this is just to notice what happens as part of this pattern. And what typically happens is, yes, I felt these sensations and I noticed it, and it lasted for about an hour. Or it lasted for about 45 minutes and then it started to subside and then it was kind of back to normal. And during this, that gives someone a chance to practice different techniques to support their nervous system or to support in terms of their thoughts or staying in the present moment. I use acceptance and commitment therapy a lot. So I'll be getting clients to use like doing dropping anchor or doing expansion or other techniques from acceptance and commitment therapy. And so they then get to experience that, okay, I did this thing. There was a lot of anticipation anxiety. It then wasn't quite as bad as I expected it to be. And then afterwards, there was this period of uncomfortableness and then it lasted for this amount of time. What I think is really useful with this is then it moves someone out of the realm of the what if and into the real world. So before making this change and before having the pizza, your mind can then be spiraling about all of these different things that may possibly occur and how hard it's going to be. And yet then you do it and you are then in touch with reality about what actually did occur. And what can happen as part of this is you may have the pizza and it is terrible. It's a really poorly made pizza. It doesn't taste very nice. And there can be a lot of regret that comes up as part of that in terms of, I wasted all of these calories eating this food that wasn't very nice. I thought this was going to be much more enjoyable than it was. And there can be all of these thoughts that come up connected to that. And when this happens, my response to clients is, I'm glad that you went through that experience. And I'm glad that you went through that experience because you got to see that happened and you were still able to survive. The whole point of recovery is about developing resilience and developing psychological flexibility. And this helps with that. It helps when things go really well. And it also helps when things don't go as well as you hoped. And you're able to then see that, okay, that wasn't a pleasant experience. It didn't go as well as I hoped. And I was still able to cope with what happened. And so really when I'm working with clients, like what I'm recommending is to constantly being setting these medium type goals, these goals that are pushing you out of your comfort zone where you're actually getting to experience what actually happens when I do this. Because I think what typically happens for many people who reach the point in their eating disorder where they do want to recover is they then spend a huge amount of time reading and listening and consuming all of this content around eating disorder recovery, and yet not really taking any action. Or they start to take action and then they stop. And then there's all of these stories and all of this what if and all of these theories that get built up, as opposed to actually doing the thing and seeing what happens in reality. And so this is what I'm recommending with clients, is constantly setting these goals and doing it, because invariably what happens is people discover that what they thought was going to happen didn't happen. Or even when something happened, their ability to handle that and respond to it is different to how they believe they would be able to. And so that is the medium goal. The final goal I want to talk about, I'm kind of calling this the 10x goal. This is really about making some kind of seismic improvement where something you currently think is impossible now becomes possible. And what would this look like? And so one of the ways to think about this could be, again, doing a bit of journaling and thinking about it, where if you were to say, I want to be over my eating disorder, over all of my fear foods, over all of this in 6 months' time or 4 months' time. Like, set something that feels completely improbable to be able to deal with all of these things. But I'm going to use this as my thought experiment. If I was going to do that, or if someone was going to do that, if it makes it easier to think of someone else doing this, what would they have to do? What would have to change for that to happen? And you can then start to write down, okay, what would have to happen as part of that? And the reason why I think that this can be a really useful, one, thought experiment as a starting place, but two, this can then become the goals and the way that you set your goals based on this thing, is it starts to cut through so much of the noise and so much of the indecision. Because, for example, if you're making some small change, you're saying, okay, I'm going to add something to my snack, or I'm going to add something to my lunch. There's so many possibilities that you could make as part of that it can become overwhelming. And you're also still staying in the same general realm that you're already in. You're kind of negotiating a little bit with the eating disorder, or you're saying, okay, I want to maybe have this thing. And then there's these thoughts that come up. And so you're in a lot of ways staying in the same place that you're in, but it's like, oh, how do I make this 5% better or 10% better? That still keeps you locked into the same level of thinking, the same kind of identity that you have, because you're in that place. Whereas if you're saying, how do I do something that is completely feels impossible at this point, it gets you thinking in a totally different way. And it really moves you out of the current rut and the way of thinking and into a totally different headspace. And this then isn't just about behaviors. This then takes a real shift in your identity, which is actually what you need to have occur to recover. And I'm assuming that just hearing this will bring up a lot of fear, and it can feel very scary just to be thinking about this. And I know that on the surface, this one can feel the scariest, but I actually truly believe that it is easier to do this than making lots of tiny little changes and hoping that all of these will add up to getting recovered. Because what often happens when I start working with someone is, for the last 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, they've been trying to make all of these incremental changes to recover. And the reality is they're basically in the same place as where they were 2, 3, 5 years ago, because none of those changes have really amounted to anything, because they're still stuck in the realm of negotiating with the eating disorder and trying to appease the eating disorder as part of the changes. And so it doesn't really get anywhere. Versus something like this completely pulls you out of that kind of headspace and really makes you start to think, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do something completely radically different. And again, this could be connected to your vision. So again, you're repeating this day after day. This is then becoming your new reality. And so that is the final way that I'm suggesting you can do your goals. I would say this is probably the one that people do the least. And I think it is the one that could be the most beneficial because of how it starts to shift your not just behaviors, but your real identity and your real complete perception around recovery and what it can look like. And so the final thing that I want to mention is that, as I said at the start, you need to figure out what works for you. I'm not saying that any one way works for every single person. But what I will say is that to recover, there needs to be structure and there needs to be goals and there needs to be intention with it. Recovery doesn't just happen. No one wakes up and is like, oh, wow, I somehow recovered. It really takes intention, it takes effort. And I really think that goal setting and then action taking based on these goals is the way to do it. Because you can set all the goals in the world that you like, but if you then don't take action on it, nothing changes. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so it is using this goal setting as a way of then focusing on what is the action that I am going to take as part of this. And look, goal setting is a big part of the fundamentals of full recovery program that I run. It's part of the first module because I think it is so important. And it's something that I then recommend continuing to do all throughout the program and all throughout recovery because it helps to give you that focus of like, what is the thing that I need to be focusing on right now? And recovery does happen in steps and in stages, and it helps to move you along as you go through those steps. So as part of the show notes, there is a link as part of that. If you want to get on the waiting list for the fundamentals of full recovery program, it's a program that at the moment the doors are closed, but I'm going to be opening the doors again in February time, and you can get on the list and be the first to be notified about that. I also have a free program that you can go through called the first 5 steps of recovery. And this, as the name would suggest, looks at the first 5 things to do as part of your recovery, and goal setting is one of the things that I touch on as part of that. And the course is free. And again, if you go to the show notes, you can find a link of how to sign up for that. And the show notes again is 7-health.com/286. So that is it for this episode. Have a good week and I will catch you soon.